For our next topic, we want to talk about making decisions and writing conclusions. In particular, we're going to talk about writing conclusions. So in hypothesis testing, which we're going to be doing in chapter 10 and chapter 11, and if you went on, you'd keep doing it in every chapter from there on out, you have to make a decision in step 5 about rejecting or not rejecting the null hypothesis. Those are the only two decisions we ever get to make, is reject the null or do not reject the null. You literally write those letters and everything. Now, you don't know why that happens yet. You'll learn that in the next section, but you're going to be making that choice. And then what you get to write in as a conclusion is based on that choice. So if you look at the exam notes packet for just a second, this is the hypothesis test for a single proportion. And you can see here in step 5, it's saying something about the p-value less than alpha, which you don't know what that means yet, but then it says reject HO. So reject HO or not, and then step 6, it says state the conclusion. As a matter of fact, it says that on the next test, state the conclusion. That's chapter 10. And if we keep going, there's chapter 11. There's another chapter 11. So obviously knowing how to state a conclusion is a big deal. And this page right here is where we learn how to do it. There are scripts involved with writing a conclusion. So if we reject HO, so let me just write the word scripts, right? They're right here. If we reject HO, then we state, there is sufficient evidence to support the claim that, and then you write what the claim was in words. But this is your script right here, right? If you do not reject HO, then there is not sufficient evidence to support the claim that. So not goes with not, and everything else otherwise is exactly the same. Then you finish off what you're writing with what H1 was in words. This is why we practiced a couple pages ago writing H1 in words. It's always H1. It's never the null that's being written about. It's always the alternative. There's no need to write about the null because the null hypothesis was assumed to be true otherwise, unless we could prove otherwise. The other thing to note is that we never write the words accept or prove. Never. You either reject or do not reject, but that's it, right? You never accept anything because you're not 100% sure that it's right. We'll talk more about that in another video. Okay, so let's practice this just once. So we have boxes of a certain kind of cereal are labeled as containing 16 ounces. An expector thinks that the mean weight may be less than this so that the company can scam its customers. He collects a random sample of cereal boxes and weighs them to test his idea. So we're going to state the null and alternative hypotheses in both symbols and words, just to practice with the words part. Right, we don't normally in a hypothesis test actually do the words part, so we're just practicing here. All right, symbols. The thing is that it's talking about the mean weight. If you can see the word mean right there. That means that we know that our parameter must be mu. And once it's mu for one, it's mu for the other. The null hypothesis always has an equal sign, always. And then we think it's 16 ounces, right? So there's our assumed value. So we think 16 ounces. And then we have to look for a direction word that'll tell us which direction we're going. And that would be right here with the less than. Less than is a left tail. So less than 16 ounces. Okay, so let's translate this to words. This would be the average weight is 16 ounces. This is the average weight is below or lower than 16 ounces. You got to have that direction word in there. All right. So now let's suppose that the inspector did not reject HO, right? They did not reject the null hypothesis. How will we write the conclusion? Well, you write the script. You'd say there is not sufficient evidence to support the claim. So you write that. There is not sufficient evidence You can write the word enough. Enough evidence is okay. Sufficient evidence to support the claim that. You have to write all of that. You never get to avoid it, right? So there's not sufficient evidence to support the claim that. Now, what was the claim? The claim was that the average weight I guess I could say of the cereal, just to give it a little more context, is below or lower than 16 ounces, or less than, lower than, something like that. Always write the script part first, and then the alternative hypothesis with its direction word there, which in our case is below. Now, it's a little strange, and I just wanted to mention this, because in step 5, we make decisions about the null hypothesis, right? We're making a decision about HO. So in step 5, and this will always be the case, we will make a decision to reject HO or do not reject HO. That is all we ever get to write, right? Those two decisions. We will actually do a touch more just about why we're making the decisions we're making, but that's it. So then we make a decision based on that HO, based on that null hypothesis. So we make decisions based on the null hypothesis. However, that's not what we write about, right? We write conclusions in step 6 about the alternative, always, right? So it's always this way. Step 5 is always about your HO, always. It's always about the null hypothesis there. Step 6 is always writing conclusions based on the alternative in context, right? In other words, the conclusions are always about the alternative. Which is a little strange because in step 5 we're making a decision about the null, but in step 6 we're talking about the H1. The H1 is always what we're talking about down here. It's a little odd, but that's the way all hypothesis tests work. So you just have to get used to it.